Kevin Hart walked into that courtroom like a man who had nothing to lose. No warning, no cameras waiting, just a quiet entrance, and a name added to the witness list at the very last moment. And what he said next changed everything. He wasn't required to be there. He wasn't subpoenaed. He came by choice. On day 5 of the explosive trial against Sean Diddy Combs, Kevin Hart stood up, took the oath, and spoke from the heart, voluntarily, emotionally, and completely without fanfare. The courtroom went still. Kevin didn't speak like a polished entertainer. He spoke like a man who had seen too much and stayed quiet for too long. He didn't bring photos. He didn't show documents. He told stories, descriptions, feelings. What it was like to be in those rooms. He described the unsettling vibe at parties, whispers behind doors, women crying in corners, rooms that no one explained, just avoided. He never said he witnessed a crime, but he saw a pattern, and he was done pretending it didn't exist. He said he came forward because someone else had the courage to go first, Cassie Ventura, and now he was adding his voice to hers. Outside the courtroom, the reaction was electric. Kevin Hart was hailed as a hero. Social media erupted with praise. Headlines called his testimony a turning point. Tweets poured in by the second. This is what allyship looks like. Kevin Hart just changed the game. Even Cassie herself was visibly moved. For the first time, she wasn't standing alone. A major name had stepped into the fire beside her. It felt real. It felt powerful. And for a few hours, Kevin Hart was a hero. But inside the courtroom, while the internet praised him, something else was brewing. Diddy's lawyers didn't interrupt. They didn't object. They didn't even blink. They let Kevin speak, and they took notes. As Kevin Hart walked out of that courtroom, the world outside erupted in applause. But inside, something colder was unfolding. Diddy's legal team didn't flinch. They didn't scramble. They didn't try to shut Kevin down. Instead, they watched, studied, measured every word he said. The defense team stayed long after the court recessed that day. Papers rustled behind closed doors. Laptops glowed well into the night. They weren't rattled. They were preparing. The media didn't see it. They were too busy building the Kevin Hart redemption arc. Social platforms were flooded with montages, edits of Kevin and Cassie, quotes from his testimony set to emotional music. Influencers posted reactions. Kevin's doing what men in this industry never do. This is a shift in the culture. But behind the scenes, the atmosphere was different. By midnight, legal insiders were whispering about strategy. Defense attorneys don't ignore a high-profile witness unless they already have a plan. A few court watchers noted something chilling. Diddy's lawyers hadn't challenged Kevin because they wanted him to speak, fully, uninterrupted, on record. That's not kindness. That's a setup. The public was still celebrating, but inside, the defense war room, they were sharpening knives. What was coming? Some assumed Diddy's team would try to discredit Kevin with past interviews or old affiliations, maybe pull up a tweet, maybe show him at a party and suggest hypocrisy. But no one expected what was really on the way. Because Diddy's team wasn't just looking to poke holes in Kevin's story, they were ready to flip the entire narrative. What if Kevin wasn't a whistleblower? What if he was an insider? What if his testimony wasn't bravery, but preemptive? Damage control? That's the theory that began to take shape, slowly, subtly, but unmistakably. And by the morning of day 6, it was ready to be unleashed. As the court reopened, the energy was different. The judge was firm. The gallery was fuller. More press, more observers, more tension. Kevin wasn't scheduled to return, but he did. And when he sat back down in the courtroom, the air tightened. He wasn't testifying again, but he was now part of the narrative in a way he hadn't anticipated. Then Diddy's attorneys stood. A sealed motion was handed to the judge. The celebration was over. The counterattack had begun. The courtroom was still buzzing from Kevin Hart's powerful testimony when Diddy's defense team made their move. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't point fingers. They simply submitted a motion, a sealed one, under the innocuous. label of relevant to motive and witness credibility. But what was inside it would flip the trial on its head. Once approved under restricted conditions, the courtroom cleared. No cameras, no audience. Just the judge, legal teams, and Kevin Hart, still seated quietly in the back row. He didn't look panicked, but he wasn't smiling either. His shoulders were tight. His lawyer leaned in closer. Then Diddy's attorney stood and delivered a single line that shifted the energy of the room completely. The witness who came forward yesterday failed to disclose his deeper familiarity with the very spaces and practices he now condemns. The judge gave a nod, and the screen lit up. Grainy footage played first, time-stamped from 2018. No audio. The location wasn't named, but its layout matched one previously described by Cassie in her testimony. The video showed a man entering a restricted hallway behind two assistants. His face was partially blurred, but the defense said it was Kevin Hart. More footage followed. Kevin arriving at events, laughing with known figures in Diddy's circle. Silent clips, no wrongdoing. Shown, but the implication was strong. Kevin wasn't just a guest, he had access. Then came the moment that broke the tension into chaos. A text message exchange, allegedly between Kevin and an unnamed associate. It read, "That setup in the basement is wild. You ever go down there during a session?" The reply was redacted, but the message was clear. This wasn't just a casual reference. This was the same basement Cassie had described, a location central to the allegations. The defense claimed this contradicted Kevin's prior claim that he had never gone downstairs and didn't know what went on beyond closed doors. Kevin didn't speak. His attorney objected immediately. Hearsay, lack of context, mischaracterization. The judge sustained part of it, but the damage was done. Suddenly, the man hailed yesterday as a truth-teller looked like someone who might have known more than he ever admitted. The prosecution tried to recover. "We are not here to try Kevin Hart," the prosecutor said sharply. "We are here because Mr. Combs is on trial for a decade of calculated abuse." But the judge responded just as firmly. Credibility of a voluntary witness is fair ground, especially if the defense believes it speaks to motive. The courtroom went silent. Then came the boldest swing yet. Diddy's lawyer stood again, and this time, they weren't just questioning Kevin's past. They were questioning his intent. What if Kevin testified not out of conscience, but out of fear? What if he knew something was about to surface? What if stepping forward early was his way of rewriting the narrative? The defense didn't say Kevin was guilty of anything, but they didn't have to. They planted the seed, and the jury listened. Outside that courtroom, the internet did more than listen. It exploded. Screenshots leaked. Clips of the silent footage hit TikTok. Hashtags flipped from Nuchta Kevin stands with Cassie to fascist Kevin knew. Comment sections turned hostile. Why didn't he mention this before? Why hide it if you had nothing to fear? The hero was now under suspicion. The public mood turned fast. One moment, he was the brave celebrity who stepped up. The next, he was the headline himself. Even mainstream media followed the shift. "Kevin Hart under fire," read one headline. "Comedian turned witness now facing scrutiny." Inside the courtroom, Kevin's team issued a quick rebuttal. His lawyer, a high-profile entertainment attorney, addressed the judge. "We categorically reject the claim that Mr. Hart was ever involved in or aware of any criminal behavior within Mr. Combs's properties. This is a strategic smear to distract from Miss Ventura's very real, very disturbing allegations." She argued the footage was edited, cropped, shown without context. She said the messages were vague, unverified, and lacked timestamps. "This is speculation, not evidence." The judge acknowledged the objections, but allowed the material to remain on the record. The jury looked different now. Some glanced at Kevin. Some reviewed their notes. Others stared at Diddy, who for the first time in days sat upright, confident, almost smug. He didn't have to prove Kevin guilty, he just had to make people wonder. And that was exactly what he did. It didn't take long. Within minutes of Diddy's courtroom bombshell, the internet turned, and it turned fast. Screenshots of the grainy footage were clipped and looped on TikTok. The text message, just one line but explosive, was screenshotted, posted, debated. Then came the hashtags. Kevin knew. Tunnel talk. Basement texts. The same platforms that had praised him the day before now dissected every second of his past. Clips resurfaced from old interviews, Kevin joking about weird parties at Diddy's house, about never staying late because things got strange after midnight. Harmless back then. But now, they didn't feel like jokes. They felt
like foreshadowing. Someone pulled a clip from 2017, Kevin on a late-night show. The host jokes about celebrity parties, and Kevin laughs, "Man, I don't ask questions after 11 p.m. The crowd laughed. Now, it was viral again, but with a very different caption. Was this a warning all along? Reddit threads emerged within hours, tracking every time Kevin had appeared at a Diddy-affiliated event from 2015 to 2020. Screenshots, event flyers, tabloid photos, a full timeline emerged. One user posted, Kevin wasn't just invited, he was present. A lot. Even a former party planner tweeted, then deleted, Kevin was at more of those events than he admitted. We all saw him. He wasn't just passing through. That tweet was gone in an hour, but the screenshots weren't. Entertainment blogs jumped on the chaos. Kevin Hart, from hero to hypocrite. Diddy's defense strikes back. Credibility crisis in the celebrity courtroom. Meanwhile, Kevin said nothing. He didn't go live, didn't tweet. No Instagram stories. His scheduled podcast appearance for the week was quietly pulled. The man known for always having something to say was suddenly silent. And that silence spoke volumes. His team issued a single-sentence statement. We deny all implications made in court today and will address them in due time. But the internet wasn't waiting. Theories multiplied. One popular idea took hold. Kevin had testified not out of principle, but to get ahead of a story. To shield himself before he was exposed. A preemptive PR strike disguised as bravery. 1. Fan tweeted, I want to believe Kevin's the good guy, but why didn't he mention the hallway, the texts, the parties? If you have nothing to hide, why not say it all? Even longtime supporters felt shaken. The cracks in Kevin's story, real or not, were enough to cast doubt. Back in the courtroom, the prosecution doubled down. They emphasized again, Kevin Hart was not on trial, he was not accused of any crime. The focus, they reminded, should remain on Diddy and the allegations against him. But public attention doesn't follow courtroom rules. What people saw, they believed. And what they believed was that Kevin Hart's testimony had gaps. Reporters hounded his reps for interviews. News anchors debated the implications. Legal. Analysts appeared on YouTube panels and Instagram lives. One said bluntly, this doesn't prove Kevin did anything wrong, but it proves that in the court of public opinion, transparency is everything. And Kevin, still silent. Some defended him. Walking through a hallway doesn't make you guilty. These are smear tactics. Of course he knew Diddy. He's a public figure, not a criminal. But others weren't so forgiving. Why omit the hallway? Why omit the text? If the basement was that wild, why pretend you didn't know about it? By nightfall, the cache Kevin knew trended in 5 countries. Influencers made reaction videos. Journalists started digging deeper into Kevin's connections, his past interviews, even his body language in court. Everything was now fair game. One TikTok creator posted a side-by-side Kevin's testimony next to the 2018 party footage, captioned, "You decide." It hit 1 million views in 3 hours. The irony was sharp. Kevin, the man who had walked into court to support a victim, was now being treated like a suspect. Not by the law, but by the public. And the pressure was mounting. People wanted answers, not statements, not silence. Real answers. But Kevin remained out of sight, and each hour he didn't speak made the speculation louder. Inside Kevin Hart's legal war room, the energy had shifted. This wasn't the victory lap his team had envisioned. Just 48 hours prior, Kevin was being praised across headlines and timelines alike.
Now he was the epicenter of speculation, and the courtroom didn't help. Because Diddy's defense hadn't just questioned Kevin's memory or character, they had questioned his motive. And in a high-profile trial, motive is everything. Kevin's lead counsel stood firm in court. She didn't mince words. "This is an intentional smear campaign," she told the judge, "a distraction meant to erode the credibility of a key, supporting witness using out-of-context footage and unverifiable messages." She argued the footage was cropped, the text lacked metadata, and none of it proved wrongdoing. She reminded the court that Kevin had not been accused of any crime, only of knowing more than he admitted. But Diddy's team countered with surgical precision. They didn't need to prove Kevin guilty, they only needed to plant doubt. And in that goal, they were succeeding. "We are not accusing Mr. Hart," the defense attorney said. "We are inviting this court to consider whether his sudden testimony was driven by conscience or fear." That sentence lingered. Fear. The prosecution tried to strike it down as pure conjecture, but the judge allowed it to remain on record, citing it as relevant to evaluating witness credibility. And just like that, the question stopped being, what? Did Kevin see? It became, why did Kevin come forward? The courtroom buzzed. Reporters whispered. Jurors scribbled more furiously. Because now it wasn't just about truth, it was about optics. Even outside the courtroom, legal commentators weighed in. One prominent analyst told a live stream audience, "This is a classic defense tactic. Don't fight the facts, just poison the perception. If the jury doubts the messenger, they might doubt the message." And it worked. Some jurors started rereading their notes on Kevin's testimony, flipping back to day 5, looking at what he said with fresh eyes. Was it heartfelt or rehearsed? Meanwhile, Kevin's team faced an impossible question. Fight back publicly or stay quiet and risk further erosion of trust. His advisors were split. Some urged him to hold a press conference, issue receipts, release the full context of the message. Others warned that any misstep would only escalate the drama and possibly backfire in court. Kevin stayed silent, but his silence had changed from principled to tactical, and everyone knew it. The fallout was clear. His brand was under pressure. Media coverage became more cautious. Podcasts that once hailed him now hedged their support. Even fellow celebrities were hesitant to speak up. In the span of days, Kevin Hart had gone from being a supporting witness in a bombshell trial to someone with questions hanging over him. Not from the law, but from the world watching. The storm around Kevin Hart was just one ripple in a much larger wave. Because what was unfolding in that courtroom wasn't just a high-profile civil trial, it was becoming something far more expansive, far more dangerous. The focus had started on Cassie Ventura, a woman finally speaking out after years of silence. Her lawsuit had triggered the proceedings. Her testimony had ignited the media firestorm. But now, that fire was spreading. Federal agents had been spotted in the gallery, quiet observers, not intervening, just watching, taking notes. Their presence sent a message. This case was no longer just about reputations, it was about systems, powerful systems, protected circles, and the people who moved inside them. Kevin Hart's moment on the stand had opened a door, maybe unintentionally, but Diddy's response had blown that door off its hinges. And with each day of the trial, more names surfaced, more affiliations revealed, more whispers turned into subpoenas. The media began asking new questions. Who else had been at those parties? Who else had access? Who else knew and stayed quiet? Reporters scrambled to build maps, relationship webs, event rosters from years past. No longer was Diddy the sole figure under the microscope. Now the lens had widened to include everyone in his orbit, and that included more than just Kevin. Cassie, meanwhile, remained calm, focused. She was photographed leaving court with her husband, silent but steady. She had said what she needed to say. Now, the story had a life of its own, and Kevin Hart, once the man stepping up to back a victim, was now wrapped in the chaos he never saw coming. The irony was sharp. In speaking up, Kevin had intended to support, to lend credibility, to show that silence wasn't the only option. But in doing so, He stepped into a minefield of secrets, power, and retaliation. And now, the trial wasn't just about what Diddy did. It was about how many people helped protect him, through silence, complicity, or fear. As the trial continued, the gallery filled with new faces, reporters, legal observers, and attorneys representing unnamed parties. The weight in the air had changed, because now it wasn't just about what Diddy did, it was about who else was involved. Kevin Hart's unraveling wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. His credibility crisis cracked the dam, and now everyone who had once stood beside Diddy, even in silence, was under a fresh kind of scrutiny. The prosecution adjusted their strategy. They no longer painted Diddy as a lone predator. Instead, they began depicting him as the nucleus of a machine, a well-oiled system of silence, secrecy, and privilege. And that machine had many moving parts. Sources whispered that new subpoenas were already in motion, that another unnamed celebrity had agreed to a private deposition, that even staffers and vendors from past events were being contacted for statements. And while none of it was confirmed publicly, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Who else was on the guest lists? Who else had access to restricted areas? Who might have seen what Cassie described and said nothing? The internet kept pace. Digital detectives pulled together timelines, social media photos, old interviews, and party footage. Celebrities who had once been seen partying with Diddy found themselves tagged in threads and theories. Some began quietly scrubbing their socials, others made cryptic statements. A few went radio silent altogether, because now every interaction could be reinterpreted. Even silence was suspicious, and through it all, Kevin Hart remained missing from the public stage. His legal team held the line. No more statements, no appearances, just silence and speculation. What had started as one woman's stand against a powerful man had evolved into something deeper, a reckoning not just with one person, but with an entire culture. And that culture was being exposed one layer at a time. The web wasn't just wide, it was still expanding. Kevin Hart entered this trial as an ally. He didn't have to show up. He wasn't subpoenaed. He wasn't accused. He came forward, spoke from the heart, and stood beside someone who needed support. And for a moment, it looked like that courage would define him. But in the courtroom and in the court of public opinion, stories shift fast. And when Diddy's legal team turned their focus on Kevin, everything changed. A grainy video, a vague text, an old party, nothing illegal, nothing confirmed, but enough to raise doubts, enough to rewrite the narrative, enough to turn Kevin Hart from a hero into a headline. His silence, once respected, became suspicious. His team's restraint was seen as strategy. Every tweet, every clip, every whisper from years past was now part of a digital investigation, led not by the FBI, but by the internet itself. And while Kevin has not been charged, implicated, or proven dishonest, the doubt was already planted, and in trials. Like this, doubt is often enough. Cassie's case continues. Diddy remains the one on trial, but the spotlight has widened. The culture of complicity is now as much on trial as the man at its center. Kevin Hart's story became the cautionary tale, not because he lied, but because he didn't say everything. Not because he was guilty, but because he once stood too close. And in this new era of exposure, standing too close is all it takes. So where does this leave him? Still silent, still offstage, still navigating a storm he may never have seen coming. And where does it leave us? Looking not just at Diddy, but at the ecosystem around him. The parties, the power, the silence. This trial was never just about one man's actions. It's about the machine behind him and the people who helped it run, even unknowingly. As the courtroom prepares for the next phase, the world watches. More names may surface. More witnesses may step forward. But one thing is already clear. The web is bigger than anyone expected, and it's still tightening. If you found this breakdown powerful, make sure to subscribe, drop a like, and comment your thoughts below. We're only just getting started.